Hello and welcome to today's webinar on unlocking on-premises software growth with product usage data. My name is Chris Cahill. I'm part of the product marketing team here at Revenera, and today I'm joined by Victor DeMarines, VP of Product Management for Software Monetization and resident expert in product usage analytics. Vic, thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Okay, so essentially the idea for today's webinar came off the back of the recently published Monetization Monitor reports. This is an annual survey of more than 450 senior leaders at global technology companies, and they contain some great insights on the rise of usage-based pricing, the growth of hybrid monetization models, and common barriers to revenue growth, among other things. If you head to revenera.com/resources, you can download the reports there. And if you're a stakeholder in monetization efforts at your company, then I'm sure you'll find these reports valuable because they really help benchmark where industry trends are and how to keep up with the competition. And one of the key findings that stood out to Vic and I was this question on deployment models. So no surprise that SaaS and cloud deployments are expected to rise. But what is surprising and somewhat goes against conventional wisdom is that this stat on on-premises software is expected to rise by 46% over the coming 18 months, which is a 21% increase compared to the previous year's results. So Vic, what's happening here? Why do you think there's this newfound respect or recognition for the potential of on-prem software growth?
Yeah, and I think we're really talking to kind of the complexity of some of the software companies in this area where, they have strategies certainly for taking some or part of their products to the cloud, but they have to respect also those use cases where their software needs to be on site, whether those are even air-gapped environments or manufacturing environments or environments with intense security concerns, and we know security is not going away. So they see maybe that the growth also aligned with maybe the slow pickup of of their end user customers going to the SaaS offerings and realizing that they still need to support some of those use cases with on-premise.
Yeah, and a lot of commentators are saying there's a shift from cloud first to cloud smart thinking. And ultimately, what this speaks to is the fact that software producers need to sell and provide access in the way that your customers want to consume, especially if you're moving from an on-prem to cloud strategy. There's going to be a time where you have hybrid offerings, and that's what we're seeing with the Monetization Monitor results. So 57% indicate SaaS is a deployment model that will increase between now and 2025, but only 15% are saying that on-premises deployments will decrease. So there's still significant opportunity to maximize your returns for on-prem products, which brings us to Revenera Usage Intelligence, which is a product usage analytics tool for on-prem software. Vic is going to give us a live demo so you can see it in action and get to grips with how it can help you identify your most valuable features and drive that transition to SaaS, enhance the user interface and user experiences, understand customer engagement, and improve communication with in-app messaging. So Vic, I'll hand over to you.
Yeah, we chose these four because certainly we've seen an increase adoption of leveraging usage intelligence for on-premise applications to support these use cases. And when we talk about SaaS transition and in a product management or a development team thinking about, okay, moving to the cloud, that's not happening overnight with that functionality. You need to look at some of the key capabilities and really understand where to start. So let me go through. I'm going to kind of transition to a demo. I'm going to show you, I'm going to come into the Revenera Usage Intelligence interface, and I'll kind of break down, based on these use cases. Okay, Chris, do you see my screen?
Yes.
Just to check. Okay,
yes,
super. All right, great. Yeah, so let's talk about, we talked about the transition to cloud. And there's numerous reports within this interface, but I think what we really talk about that is, okay, what features in my product are, are my end users using? And if I have a large install base, and if I have a large on-premise install base, you can tap into that install base to really learn what are companies finding valuable about your products and your individual features, and to what extent. And one of the probably key reports that I'm going to go to is it's the lifetime event usage reports, and I think we do a really good job within the initial screen to really give you that picture. Now, this is a simple application. I might have 1,000 of these, and there's ways to categorize and really chart those features within here. But right away, you're going to see what's used the most and what's never used, and that's a really nice picture. And this is an all-time type picture. So I'm looking at usage all time for a particular application, and at any point, I can start to compare capabilities, look at those insights over time, generate those analytics to kind of understand, where do I want to focus in on. But to that SaaS model, well, I certainly want to understand what's being used the most, and then I want to try to understand what's not being used. And there might be scenarios within the the product itself, or more recent versions of the product, where you're trying to improve the adoption of key features because you feel it's a differentiator. You feel like there should be more usage of this, and maybe it's a navigation, maybe it's a training issue. So we could do some other kind of smart things to kind of highlight that those areas. So why don't we try to look at this across different releases? So I'm going to come up here and I'm going to segment by product version and apply that. Now, the nice thing about doing that is now I can see what's happened within my more recent releases to some of these features, which initially weren't your obvious most used features. So, for example, in version 1 of the product, we can see this particular feature, this edit mode, underneath the print operations menu. 80% of my user base really never taking advantage of that capability. But as we started to roll out maybe better navigation, more training, more underlying capabilities of that feature to the market, we're starting to see more adoption. So this is something that maybe you would have initially discounted, but maybe should be looked at a little bit more for your first cloud offering. Now, if you had questions, we can filter on this many different ways. If you had questions about maybe the regional adoption of capabilities, then I can come back here and really I can get quite extensive about the filtering. I could do it by license type. I can do it by platform sort of dynamics or capabilities. I can do it by geography. So for example, if I wanted to do it by geography, I want to take a look at maybe what's happening in a continent or a state. But if we go into a country, maybe I'm interested in Germany. I have a big user base there with specific needs of capability, and I want to see how does that change this picture in terms of adoption. So a lot of functionality to filter, get down to the insight that helps drive maybe a key decision on your roadmap, and you can of course do this from different personas. So that's an example of how this type of analytics and tool could help with the transition to the cloud. Now we talked about another use case, enhancing UX and UI, and the reason we brought that up is when you talk about a product it's pretty mature in the marketplace, or maybe it's a bundle or a suite of many different solutions. There's a big user interface with that product. You're trying to make a decision, how do I modernize it? So maybe future versions of my product, the UI is going to change quite a bit, or maybe I'm taking components of that and moving to the cloud. So some of the aspects, certainly features and understanding that adoption helps, but the other things you need to consider from an on-prem, what's running locally. So things like OS and platform. I can look at the different languages, the platform and the versions, hardware architecture. What are the memory requirements for this particular application? I know that, there was some working with some customers. They wanted to. We had an existing customer who wanted to roll out a feature that they knew that was going to be memory intensive, and also had certain requirements on the actual graphics card that they wanted to, that was being used in the install base. And they had an idea to really improve their user interface and some of the features of their capability. And they were planning to roll out that release. But when they saw the usage intelligence and they saw that their customers were a step back in the requirements, they had to go back and refactor that change. So that's an important aspect of understanding your what are your existing customers running and what do they have capacity for in terms of improvement. So I think another kind of good use case for usage intelligence. And then customer engagement. Well, we're talking about features, we're talking about the deployment environment, but how about the flow of users within your application itself? And so what I'm going to do here, I'm going to come back to feature and event tracking and go to user flow. And this is basically path analytics. It allows you in a very click and drag and click method to kind of analyze the flow of your users through key applications. So I'm going to just pick a product or a feature set. And since we were starting with the original analysis, the open sort of feature, I can go 5 steps forward or back. I can start with, so I want to start with the event open and see what happens subsequent to that event, or I can do it in the middle, or I can change path as I get into it and do this in a more interactive way. Now, if I had thousands and thousands of features and events, but I want to focus in on one workflow, then I can come in here and I can exclude specific events or maybe systematic or automated events that you don't want to include in this analysis to make it more viewable, more give you more insights quicker. So if I go ahead and generate this report now, apply the filter, we're going to start with this feature and kind of see the behavior of users as they traverse through the application. And actually, I'm going to remove the previous filter that I applied on the US and kind of look at this overall. So the other nice thing about this particular capability, I can share this with other users. As you see, it's kind of, as you would expect, kind of a path analytics. So each of these color bands are actually individual events in the application. And I can see the hits in terms of end users leveraging that feature. So if I'm going from file operations, I can see there's kind of 2 main workflows that most of the users take, through, cloning and show and send email. And then I can see sort of, more complex interrelationships here as well. And if I wanted to maybe take a look at file operations and start to focus in, hey, what's happening here with this use case? I didn't expect this kind of flow. We can always go into a more interactive mode and start, say, hey, let's set this particular event as the hotspot and start moving forward in understanding the behavior of that application. And so this is, really excellent functionality for not just what is the adoption of that feature, but how do my users get to that feature? Are they failing in certain modes? Maybe they're erroring out, and I want to take a look at that in a particular flow. And it's also very important from a best practice to filter to the point where this is viewable. You can imagine for a really complex application, this becoming spaghetti. But I think a really great example of how we can understand engagement, with the application itself. So the fourth use case was, how do we act on this data? We talked about adoption. We talked about, lack of adoption of features. And unique to this platform, we have what we call reach out. And reach out is, in short, in-app messaging. And there are two methods for reach out. There's one where the application itself, our runtime, can generate a pop-up or an in-app message. And you can do that. And the unique thing there is if you wanted to go target end users from version 1 and you're now up to version 5 and you come up with a strategy where you can want to migrate them to the newest version, you can actually use our embedded in-app capability to offer them something without having to change the product. The manual reach out campaign is more an API driven. So if you have already a notification framework within your application, a way of engaging with users, then you can push down content and campaigns using our solution based on the analytics, but present them in your view, your navigation, and your banners. So when you look at, and we have a couple simple campaigns, one's moving to a standard offering, an upgrade, or showing a new pricing to end users. Kind of the nice thing here is when you design your campaigns, as you build your filters for how you want to apply those campaigns, you will see the number of users that are going to be affected by it in terms of your install base, and you can also see the delivery of that campaign to your user base. And so that's pretty compelling functionality. I can also, modify, if we're doing our own automated capability, we can modify where we want this to be placed on the screen. We can insert the content and have a lot of control over that. I mentioned filtering, and this is where you would take a look at, so maybe, we talked about license type here, but maybe I want to look at only, versions 2 and 3.1 that I want to offer this. And what this is going to do is it's going to now focus this particular campaign on that user base and get you more specific to the use case you're trying to do. And you can also see at any point in time, the number of, messages that are going to be generated or number of clients that will actually see that campaign and then see the delivery path of that. So acting on this data, and I would say, certainly there's the opportunity from, trying to drive additional revenue by moving up to or upselling to a different version of the application. But we also see a lot of interest in just providing more context, sensitive training. So users hitting a feature, but they haven't spent a lot of time on that. I might want to filter by the total lifetime and that specific feature and pop up a link to a training video to help educate them on that new feature. So education, a big use case with usage intelligence. So that was a pretty quick demo. I hope that helped. Let's come back to the slide deck. And so what we're going to do now is I wanted to spend some time on a couple existing customers and how they leverage this solution. This one is very specific to a company. And I think this company is, rare in the sense that they realize that all of their functionality can move to the SaaS. It's not the hybrid use case. They had a new CEO, Toby Martin, who came on board, understood that at an early stage of their company that they needed to move to SaaS in a complete way, and they needed usage intelligence to drive that strategy and be data driven. And we're talking about a pretty big base of organizations, 225,000 customers with their deployment. And they had certainly a number of feature sets they had their ideas on, but they also had a kind of an implementation where they rolled out usage analytics across 3 different development teams and created their own advisors internally to give input to their strategy and their roadmap. And if they just looked at QA time, right, from moving to SaaS and taking just a subset of those features and validating those features in the platform, they estimated they were saving 10 to 20,000 per release in moving to the SaaS strategy. And one of the reports that Toby, the CEO, was his go-to report every day was that lifetime event report that I showed you, which showed what's being used and what's not being used. An interesting story here. He was straight up front with us because the usage intelligence solution is an on-prem. It's focused on on-prem software. He said, eventually we're not going to use your solution. We're going to be moving to cloud. We'll have different ways of doing analytics on the cloud, but we expect to, if we're successful, to get off your solution. And it was kind of interesting, when we engaged with them, I think they traditionally, they had assessed that they didn't need our application. And then when they came back a few months later, they realized they still needed to message to their existing on-premise applications that hadn't fully transitioned to cloud. So they were using the functionality, not from a intelligence on feature perspective, but using it from an in-app perspective to drive adoption of a cloud strategy. So, really good use case for SaaS transition. So let's go to just one more. So this is a company, TechSmith. You may have used their product, Snagit, for screenshots, and Camtasia for managing your videos. Awesome tools. A lot of experience with the user interface and making it simple. They had some key metrics that just they drove in terms of their success with usage intelligence. And one of them was the trial conversion rate. That was something that they knew how to measure and had metrics around. And prior to leveraging analytics and prior to looking at the insights that they're delivering through the platform, they were seeing a 5% conversion rate. But after taking advantage of those analytics, coupled with in-app messaging and delivering those at the right time, I think one of the stories that came out of this particular case study is when they first started to measure the evaluation period for their trial users, their expectation was that a user would stick with the solution for a month in terms of looking at the software. They were quite surprised how quick the users would drop off and not really see the core functionality of how to build the video, for example. So what they did is they accelerated their in-app messaging to be much sooner in that whole experience when you get an evaluation and start using that software. And they were able to get their conversion rate up to 13%. And that translated to a 1 million top line revenue increase. And that's huge for a company of this size. So great use case for using analytics to understand the engagement, to understand how the solutions are being used, and most importantly, to have top line revenue impact. I think back to you, Chris. Thank you.
It's so good to see the product in action. That's a fantastic demo. I guess it's brilliant to get an insight into the functionality because most on-premises products don't have this level of built-in analytics, which is where a platform like Usage Intelligence can come in handy, especially when you see the results like that TechSmith adding $1 million to top line revenue through that in-app messaging capability.
Yeah, and I've seen a lot of customers, they capture data, Chris, like they'll have logging, and they might even have some usage intelligence, but it always seems to be a challenge for them to operationalize it, to visualize it, to offer it in a platform that can share with others. And that's certainly where we have some good capability.
Yeah, and it's a great product, really easy to use, as you showed us there. So we do offer a 30-day free trial of Revenera Usage Intelligence. You can sign up and get full feature access to start leveraging real product usage data. You can take the guesswork out of product management, start to understand your user environments, user flow, your most valuable features, all of that good stuff that Vic demoed. So head to revenera.com or Google Revenera Usage Intelligence free trial, and away you go. You start getting real insights into how your on-prem products are being used and where growth opportunities lie, how you can start to replicate the success of Extensive and TechSmith. So Vic, thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks, Chris.
Enjoy the rest of your day.
All right, bye-bye.
Bye.